The room was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of lavender and betrayal. Margaret, my mother-in-law, sat across from me, her lips curled into a sneer that could curdle milk. "You're nothing but a gold digger, Clara," she spat, her voice slicing through the silence of her pristine parlor. I froze, my coffee cup trembling in my hands. The accusation wasn't new. Margaret had never hidden her disdain for me, but hearing it so bluntly, in front of my husband, James, felt like a slap. I glanced at him, hoping for defense, but his eyes were fixed on the floor, his jaw tight. 3 years of marriage, and still, he wavered under her shadow. This wasn't just a family spat. It was a war, one I hadn't chosen but was now forced to fight. Margaret had spent years building her empire of influence over James, her only son, and the sprawling estate that bore the family name. To her, I was an intruder, a nobody who'd seduced her golden boy for his inheritance. But she didn't know the truth. Not yet. I set the cup down, the clink echoing in the tense room. "Margaret," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest, "you've always underestimated me. That's your first mistake." Her eyes narrowed, but I held her gaze. I wasn't the timid girl she'd met 3 years ago, fresh from a small town with dreams bigger than my bank account. I'd built a life with James, not because of his wealth, but despite it. And I'd uncovered something that would shatter her carefully constructed world. The trouble began long before I met James. Margaret had ruled the Hawthorne estate like a queen, her late husband's fortune giving her power over everyone in her orbit. She'd groomed James to inherit it all, but only under her terms. When he brought me home, a graphic designer with no pedigree, she saw a threat. To her, I was a leech, latching onto her son's future. "You'll never belong here," she'd said at our engagement party, her voice low so only I could hear. The guests around us sipped champagne, oblivious to the venom in her smile. I'd laughed it off then, thinking love would be enough to bridge the gap. I was wrong. James and I married in a small ceremony. Margaret refused to attend, and settled into a modest house on the edge of the estate. I thought we'd escaped her reach, but her influence lingered. She'd call James daily, questioning his decisions, reminding him of his duty to the family legacy. Every dinner at the main house was a battlefield, her barbed comments about my common background cutting deeper each time. But I wasn't helpless. I'd always been resourceful, a skill honed from years of scraping by. While Margaret plotted to undermine me, I was quietly building my own career. My freelance design work took off, landing me clients who paid well enough to rival James's trust fund. I didn't need the Hawthorne money, but Margaret refused to see it. To her, I was a schemer, and she was determined to expose me. One evening, as James and I sat in our cozy living room, he confessed something that changed everything. "Clara, there's something about the estate you don't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darted to the door, as if Margaret might burst in. "It's not what it seems." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then handed me a faded letter he'd found in his father's old study. It was addressed to a lawyer, written in his father's shaky hand, and it hinted at a secret that could unravel the Hawthorne legacy. "Dad wasn't the sole owner," James said. "There's someone else." I read the letter, my mind racing. It mentioned a trust, a hidden partner, and a clause that could shift control of the estate. If true, Margaret's grip on the family fortune was a house of cards, and I was about to pull the first one. The next morning, I began digging. I wasn't a detective, but I knew how to follow a trail. The letter pointed to a law firm in Boston, one that had handled the Hawthorne estate for decades. I called, posing as a family representative, and requested records from the time of James's father's death. The receptionist was hesitant, but a little charm and persistence got me an appointment. The lawyer, Mr. Grayson, was an older man with a kind face but sharp eyes. He studied me as I explained my request, leaving out the part about Margaret's accusations. "You're looking into the estate's origins?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "That's unusual." "I'm just trying to understand my husband's legacy," I said, keeping my tone light. He nodded, but I could tell he sensed there was more to it. Days later, he sent me a box of documents. Most were mundane, deeds, tax records, But buried in the pile was a contract that made my breath catch. It was a partnership agreement, signed by James's father and a man named Edward Langley. The estate, it seemed, wasn't wholly owned by the Hawthorns. Edward held a 50% stake, a fact that had been buried after his death. I tracked down Edward's surviving family through public records. His daughter, Amelia, lived in a modest apartment in Chicago. When I called her, she was cautious but curious. "My father never talked about the Hawthorns," she said. "But he left me some papers when he died. I can send them to you." When the package arrived, I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note from Edward, detailing how he and James's father had built the estate together. But there was more, a legal document transferring Edward's share to a trust, with instructions to reveal it only under specific conditions. One of those conditions was met when James married someone outside the family's approved circle, someone like me. I didn't tell James everything right away. He was already torn, caught between loyalty to his mother and love for me. I needed to be sure before I upended his world. Instead, I focused on Amelia. We met in person, and I liked her instantly. She was warm, grounded, and fiercely intelligent. Over coffee, she shared stories of her father's dreams, how he'd been pushed out by Margaret's ambition after his death. Dad always said the Hawthorns played dirty, Amelia told me, her eyes distant. But he never fought back. He didn't want the conflict. "Well, I do," I said, surprising myself with the fire in my voice. "Margaret's been trying to ruin me since the day I met her. It's time she faced the truth." Amelia agreed to help. Together, we hired a lawyer to verify the documents and prepare a case. The trust, it turned out, gave Amelia's family a claim to half the estate's assets, land, investments, everything. If we played this right, Margaret's reign would end. But there was a catch. The trust required a public disclosure, a legal confrontation that would expose the Hawthorne family's secrets. James would have to choose a side, and I wasn't sure he was ready. As I drove home, the weight of what lay ahead settled over me. This wasn't just about proving Margaret wrong. It was about rewriting the future. The dining room at the Hawthorne estate felt like a courtroom, with Margaret presiding as judge and jury. She sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, her eyes boring into me. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "why don't you tell us about your latest project?" James shifted uncomfortably beside me, his fork hovering over his untouched salmon. I knew what she was doing, baiting me in front of the family friends she'd invited for dinner, all wealthy allies who shared her disdain for outsiders like me. I smiled, letting her think she had the upper hand. "Oh, Margaret, it's just a little research into family history," I said lightly. "You'd be surprised what you can uncover." Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, turning to her guests with a laugh. "Clara fancies herself a detective now. Next, she'll be digging through our trash for secrets." The table erupted in polite chuckles, but I caught the glint of unease in her eyes. She knew I was up to something. Back at our house, I spread the documents across our dining table, the papers glowing under the lamplight. Amelia had sent more records, including a letter from Edward Langley to James's father, pleading for fairness after their partnership soured. "He trusted your father-in-law," Amelia had told me over the phone. "But Margaret manipulated everything after Dad died." I traced the signatures on the trust agreement, my heart racing. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice. Edward had been erased from the Hawthorne legacy, his contributions buried under Margaret's lies. But exposing her meant dragging James into the fight, and I wasn't sure he could handle it. "Clara, what are you doing?" James's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the papers. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The partnership, the trust, Amelia's claim. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something darker. "You're saying my mother stole half the estate?" "Not stole," I said carefully. "Hid." She buried the truth to keep control. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, running a hand through his hair. "I need time to process this," he muttered, retreating to the bedroom. I stared at the closed door, my chest tight. I'd known this would be hard, but seeing James so torn hurt more than Margaret's insults. Still, I couldn't stop now. The truth was a wildfire, and I was holding the match. The next week was a blur of strategy. Amelia and I met with our lawyer, Ms. Carter, a no-nonsense woman who specialized in estate disputes. She reviewed the documents and whistled. "This is airtight," she said. "The trust conditions are clear. Edward's share activates upon a marriage like yours, Clara. Margaret's been sitting on a time bomb. But how do we prove it in court?" Amelia asked, her hands clasped tightly. "Margaret's got money, connections. She'll fight dirty." Ms. Carter smirked. "Let her try? The law doesn't care about her social status. We just need to file the claim and force a public audit of the estate." I nodded, but my mind was on James. He'd been distant since our talk, spending hours at the main house with Margaret. I worried she was poisoning him against me, spinning her version of the truth. I needed him on my side, not just for the legal battle, but for us. Our marriage was at stake. That night, I confronted him. "James, we need to talk about this," I said, catching him as he walked in. "I know it's a lot, but we can't ignore what your mother did." He sighed, dropping his keys on the counter. "Clara, she's my mother. She's not perfect, but she's not a villain. Maybe there's an explanation." "An explanation for erasing a man's legacy?" My voice rose, sharper than I intended. "She's been lying to you your whole life, James. And she's been calling me a gold digger to keep you under her thumb." He flinched, but his eyes softened. "I know she's hard on you, but it's tearing everything apart. Can't we just let it go?" I stared at him, my heart sinking. "Let it go? James, this isn't just about me. It's about what's right. Edward's family deserves their share, and I deserve to be seen as more than a parasite." He didn't respond, but the silence spoke volumes. For the first time, I wondered if love would be enough. Amelia and I pressed forward, preparing for the legal battle. Ms. Carter filed the initial claim, and whispers began spreading through the town. Margaret's allies, the ones who'd laughed at her dinner table jabs, started calling with questions. I overheard one of James's cousins at a local cafe, muttering about family secrets. The pressure was building, and Margaret knew it. She cornered me at a charity gala she'd insisted we attend. The ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and fake smiles, but her eyes were daggers as she pulled me aside. "Whatever you're planning, Clara, you'll regret it," she hissed. "You think you can destroy me? I've buried better women than you." I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "You're not untouchable, Margaret. The truth is coming, and it's bigger than your threats." Her face paled, but she turned away, her composure intact. I watched her glide back into the crowd, charming her guests as if nothing had happened. But I saw the crack in her armor. She was scared. As the court date approached, I threw myself into work, needing an escape from the tension at home. My latest design project, a campaign for a national brand, was a success, and the paycheck was enough to buy our house outright if we wanted. I didn't need the Hawthorne money, but Margaret's accusations still stung. I wanted her to see me for who I was, not a gold digger, but a woman who'd built her own success. Amelia, meanwhile, became my rock. We spent late nights strategizing, laughing over wine, and sharing stories of our families. She told me about her father's love for the estate, how he designed its gardens before Margaret claimed credit. "He'd be proud of this," she said, her eyes shining. "Of us." I smiled, but my thoughts were on James. He was slipping away, caught in his mother's web. I had to make him see the truth, not just for the estate, but for our future. The battle was only beginning, and I needed him by my side. The courthouse steps loomed like a guillotine, cold and unyielding under the gray November sky. I clutched the folder of documents, my knuckles white, as Amelia walked beside me, her face set with quiet resolve. Today was the first hearing, and Margaret's empire was about to crack, or crush us. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Margaret sat with her lawyer, a sleek man in a tailored suit, her expression a mask of calm arrogance. James was there too, in the back row, his eyes avoiding mine. My heart twisted, but I straightened my spine. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth, about Amelia's father, about proving I was more than the label Margaret had pinned on me. Ms. Carter presented our case with surgical precision, laying out the partnership agreement and the trust conditions. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, listened intently, her pen scratching notes. "This is a significant claim," she said, peering over her glasses at Margaret. "Mrs. Hawthorne, your response." Margaret's lawyer stood, his voice smooth as silk. "My client was unaware of any such agreement. These documents could be fabricated, and Mrs. Clara Hawthorne has a clear motive: personal gain." He glanced at me, his implication clear. "Gold digger." I felt the room's eyes on me, but I kept my gaze steady. Ms. Carter countered with notarized records and Edward Langley's letters, each piece of evidence a brick in the wall we were building. The judge nodded, scheduling a full audit of the estate's records. "This matter requires thorough investigation," she declared. Margaret's composure slipped for a moment, her lips tightening. Outside, Amelia grabbed my arm, her eyes bright. "We did it, Clara. The audit's going to expose everything." I forced a smile, but my eyes were on James, who'd slipped out without a word. His absence felt like a betrayal, and I wondered if Margaret had won him over. That night, I found James in our kitchen, staring at a glass of whiskey. "You didn't stay," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. He looked up, his face etched with exhaustion. "I couldn't, Clara. It's too much, watching you and Mom tear each other apart." "This isn't about her and me," I said, sitting across from him. "It's about what's right. Your mother buried Edward Langley's legacy to keep control. Don't you want the truth?" He rubbed his temples. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Mom says you're doing this to hurt her, to take the estate for yourself." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think I want her money? James, I've been paying our bills with my own work. I'm doing this because she's been lying to you, to everyone, and because I love you." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered, "but I don't know how to fix this." "Then trust me," I said, reaching for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. The audit began, and the estate's secrets started unraveling. Accountants pored over decades of financial records, uncovering discrepancies that pointed to Margaret's manipulation. She'd funneled profits into hidden accounts, claiming full ownership while Edward's share was quietly erased. Amelia and I met daily with Ms. Carter, building our case, but the pressure was mounting. Margaret's allies spread rumors, calling me a troublemaker, a schemer. My clients started getting anonymous emails questioning my integrity, and I knew who was behind it. One afternoon, I found a note slipped under our door. "Drop this, or you'll regret it." It read, the handwriting sharp and angry. I showed it to Amelia, who frowned. "She's desperate," she said. "We're getting close." I nodded, but fear gnawed at me. Margaret wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her identity. The Hawthorne name was her crown, and she'd do anything to keep it. I started locking our doors at night, checking the windows. James noticed, his worry growing. "Clara, are you sure about this?" he asked one evening. "What if she's dangerous?" "She's not dangerous," I said, though I wasn't sure. "She's scared, and that makes her predictable." The next blow came at a family dinner Margaret insisted on hosting. The table was set with her finest china, but the mood was anything but festive. She'd invited her closest allies, a group of old-money families who'd always backed her. "Clara," she said, raising her glass, "why don't you share your little hobby with our guests? This investigation of yours." The room went silent, all eyes on me. I set my fork down, meeting her gaze. "I'm uncovering the truth about the estate," I said calmly. "It seems your late husband had a partner, Margaret. Someone you conveniently forgot." Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret's smile froze, but she recovered quickly. "Nonsense," she said, her voice icy. "You're spreading lies to tarnish our family." "Then let the audit prove me wrong," I shot back. James's hand found mine under the table, a small gesture that gave me strength. For the first time, I felt he was with me. As the audit progressed, more evidence surfaced. A hidden ledger showed payments to silence Edward's family after his death. Amelia's eyes filled with tears when she saw it. "Dad deserved better," she said. "He trusted them." I hugged her, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about winning. It was about giving Edward's memory the respect it deserved. But Margaret wasn't done. She hired a private investigator to dig into my past, hoping to find dirt. He found nothing but my college loans and a few parking tickets. I was clean, and it infuriated her. James, meanwhile, was coming around. He started asking questions, digging into his father's old files himself. One night, he found a photo of his father and Edward, laughing together in the estate's gardens. They were friends, he said, his voice breaking. Mom never told me. I wrapped my arms around him. We're doing this for them, James. For the truth. He nodded, and I knew I had him back. My heart stopped. Are you okay? I asked, already pulling on my shoes. James was on his feet, grabbing his keys. I'm fine, Amelia said. But they took the original documents. The ones from Dad. We sped to Chicago, the highway a blur of headlights and dread. Amelia met us at her building, her face drawn but resolute. The police were there, taking statements. But the intruder had been careful. No fingerprints, no trace. This was Margaret, I said, my voice low. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He was starting to see her for who she was. The break-in was a desperate move, but it backfired. The originals were gone, but we had digital copies, safely stored with Miss Carter. The police report only strengthened our case, painting Margaret as someone with something to hide. The judge ordered a faster audit, and the media caught wind of the story. Headlines screamed about the Hawthorne scandal, and Margaret's carefully curated image began to crack. She doubled down, hosting a press conference to paint herself as a victim. My daughter-in-law is obsessed with destroying our family, she told the cameras, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. She's manipulated my son and fabricated lies about our legacy. I watched the broadcast from our living room, my hands clenched into fists. James turned off the TV, his face grim. She's lying, he said. I'm done pretending she's not. His words were a lifeline. For months, I'd fought alone, but now James was with me, fully. He called Ms. Carter, offering to testify about his father's papers and his mother's control over the estate. I should have done this sooner, he told me, his eyes full of regret. I let her manipulate me. I touched his cheek, my anger softening. You're here now? That's what matters. The audit revealed more than we'd hoped. Not only had Margaret hidden Edward's share, but she'd siphoned funds into offshore accounts, evading taxes for years. Ms. Carter called it a gold mine for our case. This isn't just about the trust anymore, she said. She could face criminal charges. Amelia and I met to plan our next move. She was nervous, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup. What if we push too hard? She asked. Margaret's powerful. She could ruin us. She's already tried, I said, thinking of the break-in, the rumors, the threats. But we're stronger than she thinks. We have the truth. Amelia nodded, her resolve returning. For Dad, she said softly. I squeezed her hand, feeling a bond forged in this fight. We weren't just allies. We were family now, united by a shared purpose. Margaret's next move was personal. She called James, begging him to stop the lawsuit. You're breaking my heart, she sobbed over the phone, loud enough for me to hear. After everything I've done for you, you'd let that woman destroy me? James's face hardened. You brought this on yourself, Mom, he said, his voice steady. You lied about Dad's partner. You lied about Clara. I'm done protecting you. He hung up, and for the first time, I saw him stand taller, free of her shadow. But Margaret wasn't finished. She sent a letter to our house, addressed to me. You think you've won, it read, but you'll never be one of us. Walk away, or I'll make sure you lose everything. The words stung, but they also fueled me. She thought I was weak, but I was ready to prove her wrong. The second hearing was a turning point. Ms. Carter presented the audit's findings, including the offshore accounts. The judge's face darkened as she reviewed the evidence. Mrs. Hawthorne, she said, her voice sharp, these are serious allegations. You'll need to answer for this. Margaret's lawyer stammered, caught off guard. The room buzzed with whispers as her allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I glanced at James, who sat beside me now, his hand gripping mine. Amelia was on my other side, her eyes shining with hope. For the first time, I felt we could win. After the hearing, Margaret approached us outside the courthouse. Her face was a mask of fury, but her voice was low, venomous. You're tearing this family apart, Clara, she said. You'll regret this. I stepped forward, meeting her gaze. The only thing I regret is letting you call me a gold digger for so long. You built your empire on lies, Margaret. It's over. She flinched, and for a moment, I saw fear in her eyes. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement. James squeezed my hand. You were incredible, he said. I smiled, but my heart was heavy. This wasn't over yet. Back home, I found an old photo of Edward Langley and James's father, tucked in the documents Amelia had sent. They were young, smiling, standing in the estate's gardens. It reminded me why we were fighting, not just for justice, but for the memory of men who'd built something together, only to have it stolen by greed. I showed the photo to James, and his eyes softened. Dad would have wanted this, he said. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a liar. We sat together, planning the next steps, our marriage stronger for it. The battle had tested us, but it had also shown us what we could be together. Amelia called later, her voice bright. The judge wants a mediation session before the final ruling, she said. Margaret's team is scrambling. We've got her. I hung up, feeling a flicker of hope. But I knew Margaret wouldn't go down without a fight. She'd built her life on control, and she'd do anything to keep it. The war wasn't over, but I was ready for the next battle. The mediation room was a sterile box, all white walls and polished wood, but it crackled with tension like a storm about to break. Margaret sat across from us, her face a fortress of defiance, her lawyer whispering in her ear. I held James's hand under the table, my pulse racing as Amelia and Ms. Carter laid out our terms. Half the estate to Edward's family, full transparency, and an apology. Margaret laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the room. You think I'll hand over my life's work to a nobody and her sidekick? She said, her eyes flicking from me to Amelia. You're delusional. I leaned forward, my voice calm but steel-edged. Your life's work was built on a lie, Margaret. The truth is out, and it's not going away. The mediator, a gray-haired man with a tired expression, urged compromise, but Margaret wouldn't budge. She denied everything, the partnership, the trust, the offshore accounts. Her lawyer presented a counterclaim, accusing me of forging documents for personal gain. It was a desperate move, and Ms. Carter dismantled it with ease, producing certified copies of Edward's letters and the audit's findings. James spoke up, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Mom, I found Dad's journal. He wrote about Edward, about their dreams for the estate. You knew, and you hid it. The room went silent. Margaret's face paled, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she had no comeback. The mediator adjourned the session, giving Margaret a week to reconsider. Outside, Amelia hugged me, her eyes bright with hope. We're so close, she said. She's cracking. But I wasn't so sure. Margaret's silence felt like the calm before a storm, and I braced for her next move. That night, James and I sat on our porch, the stars bright above the estate's sprawling lawns. I'm sorry I doubted you, he said, his voice low. I was scared of losing her, but I see it now. She's been controlling everything. Dad's memory, me, you. I leaned against him, my heart full. We're in this together now, I said. No matter what she does next. He kissed my forehead, and for the first time in months, I felt we were unbreakable. But Margaret wasn't done. The next morning, a local paper ran a story accusing me of blackmailing the Hawthorne family. It was filled with lies, quotes from anonymous sources claiming I'd seduced James for his money and fabricated the trust to extort Margaret. I knew it was her doing, a last-ditch effort to ruin my reputation. My clients started pulling away, hesitant to work with someone tangled in scandal. I spent hours on the phone, reassuring them, but the damage was done. My career, the one thing I'd built on my own, was under attack. I wanted to scream, to confront Margaret, but Amelia stopped me. She wants you to lose control, she said. Don't give her that. She was right. I focused on the case, pouring my anger into preparation. Ms. Carter uncovered more evidence. A recorded conversation between Margaret and her accountant, discussing how to handle Edward's family after his death. It was damning, and we planned to use it in court. The final hearing loomed, and the town was buzzing. Margaret's allies were quieter now, some distancing themselves as the evidence mounted. I saw it in their eyes at the grocery store, the coffee shop, doubt, curiosity, maybe even respect. I wasn't just the gold digger anymore. I was the woman taking on Margaret Hawthorne. James and I grew closer, united in purpose. He started speaking out, telling friends and family about his father's true legacy. One evening, he showed me a letter he'd written to the local paper, defending me and exposing his mother's lies. "I want the world to know who you are," he said, his eyes fierce. "You're not what she says. You're everything." Tears stung my eyes as I read it. The letter was published the next day, and the response was overwhelming. Strangers sent messages of support, and even some of Margaret's allies reached out, questioning her story. The tide was turning. Amelia and I met one last time before the hearing. She brought a photo of her father, smiling in the estate's gardens. "He'd be proud of you," I told her, my voice thick. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "He'd be proud of us both." We talked strategy, but also dreams, what we'd do if we won. Amelia wanted to honor her father's memory, maybe start a foundation with her share of the estate. I wanted to rebuild my career, free of Margaret's shadow. And I wanted James and me to start fresh, to build a life that was ours, not hers. As we left the cafe, a car slowed beside us. The window rolled down, and Margaret's face appeared, her eyes cold. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Walk away now, and I'll let you keep your dignity." I laughed, surprising myself. "My dignity's not yours to give, Margaret. See you in court." She drove off, and Amelia grinned. "You're a badass, Clara." I smiled, but inside, I was steeling myself. The final battle was coming, and I was ready to finish it. The courtroom was a battlefield, the air thick with anticipation as the final hearing began. Margaret sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of icy control, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. Today, we'd expose her lies, or she'd bury us under hers. Miss Carter stood, her voice commanding as she presented the final evidence. The recorded conversation, the offshore accounts, the letters proving Edward's partnership. "Mrs. Hawthorne has defrauded this estate for decades," she said, her words cutting through the room. "It's time for justice." Margaret's lawyer scrambled, objecting, claiming the evidence was circumstantial. But the judge wasn't swayed. She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Mrs. Hawthorne, the court is inclined to rule in favor of the plaintiffs unless you can provide a compelling defense." Margaret took the stand, her voice steady but her hands trembling. She spun a story of loyalty to her husband's legacy, claiming Edward had willingly signed away his share. "I protected this family," she said, her eyes flicking to James. "Everything I did was for you." James stood, his voice raw. "You lied to me, Mom. You erased Edward to keep control. Dad would have been ashamed." The courtroom gasped, and Margaret's composure cracked, her eyes welling with tears. For the first time, she looked human, not a queen. I glanced at Amelia, who clutched my hand, her face a mix of triumph and sorrow. This wasn't just about winning. It was about righting a wrong that had haunted her family for decades. The judge called a recess, and we stepped outside, the weight of the moment settling over us. In the hallway, James pulled me aside. "I'm sorry I wasn't stronger sooner," he said, his voice breaking. "I let her manipulate me, but I see it now. I see you." He kissed me, fierce and desperate, and I felt the years of doubt melt away. We were a team, unbreakable. Amelia joined us, her eyes bright. "Whatever happens, we did this together," she said. I nodded, my heart full. This fight had given me more than justice. It had given me a sister, a partner, a purpose. Back in the courtroom, Margaret's lawyer made a final plea, but it was weak, crumbling under the weight of our evidence. The judge's ruling was swift. The trust was valid. Edward's family was entitled to half the estate, and Margaret would face a separate investigation for financial misconduct. The gavel fell, and the room erupted in murmurs. Margaret sat frozen, her face pale as her allies whispered behind her. I felt no joy, only a quiet resolve. She'd branded me a gold digger, but I'd uncovered her truth. Amelia hugged me, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "For Dad." The aftermath was chaos. The media swarmed, calling it the fall of the Hawthorne Empire. Margaret's allies distanced themselves, and her social empire crumbled. She retreated to the main house, refusing to speak to anyone, even James. Part of me pitied her. She'd built her life on a lie, and now it was gone. James and I moved forward, stronger than ever. He sold his share of the estate to Amelia, who planned to turn it into a community center honoring her father. My career rebounded, my clients returning after the truth came out. I wasn't just Clara, the gold digger. I was Clara, the woman who'd taken on Margaret Hawthorne and won. One evening, Amelia and I walked the estate's gardens, now hers to steward. The flowers Edward had planted decades ago bloomed brightly, a testament to his legacy. He'd love this, Amelia said, her voice soft. I nodded, feeling his presence in the air. But Margaret had one last move. A week after the ruling, she sent a letter to James, begging for forgiveness. I was wrong, she wrote, but I only wanted to protect you. James read it, his face unreadable, then set it down. She's still trying to control me, he said. I'm done. He didn't respond, and neither did I. Margaret had lost her power, her legacy rewritten by the truth. We were free, not just from her, but from the weight of her lies. As we rebuilt, I realized this fight had changed me. I wasn't the small-town girl anymore, nor the wife desperate for approval. I was Clara, fierce and unafraid, with a husband who'd chosen me and a friend who'd fought beside me. The estate was no longer a symbol of wealth. It was a reminder of what we'd overcome. The sun set over the Hawthorne estate, casting golden light across the gardens Edward Langley had once tended. I stood beside Amelia, watching workers break ground on the new community center, a dream born from her father's legacy. James squeezed my hand, his smile warm, free of the shadows that had haunted us for so long. The victory in court had been ours, but the real triumph was here, in this moment, reclaiming a truth that had been buried, building something new from the ashes of Margaret's empire. I wasn't the gold digger she'd branded me. I was the woman who'd fought for justice, for love, for a future we could all believe in. The months after the ruling were a whirlwind. Amelia took ownership of her half of the estate, transforming the sprawling grounds into a space for the community. Art classes, job training, a garden open to all. She named it the Langley Center, a tribute to her father's vision. I designed the logo, a blooming flower with roots deep in the earth, symbolizing resilience and growth. James and I sold our share, using the funds to buy a house in town, a cozy place free of the estate's ghosts. Our marriage, tested by fire, emerged stronger. He started a small business, consulting for local nonprofits, his passion for helping others finally free from his mother's expectations. At night, we'd sit on our porch, dreaming of a future that was ours alone. Margaret faded from the public eye. She stayed in the main house, now half its former size, her allies gone, her influence shattered. I heard rumors she'd started painting, a quiet hobby to fill her days. Part of me hoped she'd find peace, but I'd never forget the pain she'd caused. One afternoon, Amelia and I sat in the Langley Center's new cafe, sipping coffee as kids laughed outside. I couldn't have done this without you, she said, her eyes warm. You gave me back my father's legacy. You gave me a sister, I replied, smiling. Our bond, forged in battle, was unbreakable. We'd faced Margaret's wrath together, and now we were building something beautiful. James joined us, his arm around my shoulders. I got a letter from Mom, he said, his voice neutral. She wants to meet, to make amends. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. What did you say? Nothing yet, he admitted. I don't know if I'm ready. I nodded, understanding. Margaret's apology, if genuine, was a start, but trust would take time. We'd all been scarred, but we were healing. My career soared. The scandal had made me a local hero of sorts, and clients flooded in, drawn to my story of resilience. I took on pro bono work for the Langley Center, designing flyers and websites to spread its mission. Every project felt like a middle finger to Margaret's accusations. I wasn't here for money. I was here for purpose. One evening, James and I hosted a dinner for Amelia and her family. Her kids ran through our backyard, their laughter echoing as we shared stories of the fight. To Clara, Amelia toasted, raising her glass. The woman who took on a dragon and won. I laughed, blushing. To all of us, I said. We did this together. James's eyes met mine, full of pride, and I knew we'd made it through the worst. As the Langley Center opened its doors, the town came out in droves. People who'd once whispered about me now shook my hand, thanking me for the change. I saw Margaret's old allies in the crowd, their faces sheepish. They didn't matter anymore. This was our victory, not theirs. Amelia gave a speech, her voice steady as she honored her father. "This place is for everyone," she said, because that's what he believed in. I clapped, tears in my eyes, feeling Edward's presence in the applause. Later, James and I walked the gardens, the same ones his father and Edward had loved. "I'm proud of you," he said, pulling me close. "You didn't just save the estate, you saved us." I kissed him, my heart full. "We saved each other," I whispered. The stars above us shone bright, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The story wasn't over, not really. Life never ties up neatly, and Margaret's shadow would linger. But we'd faced her, faced the lies, and come out stronger. I wasn't the gold digger she'd called me. I was Clara, wife, friend, fighter. And this was my legacy, written not in money, but in truth.